All right, so now we're talking about complex, advanced 1031 exchange questions. Once again, we're back with Kandas Myer. She's with 1031specialist.com. We're in Reno, Nevada. She's one of the best in town. The QIs, we call it, qualified intermediary. Talking about 1031s, but we're talking about the advanced section now.
We're in the
Just
advanced
covered,
stuff now.
If you want to see our previous video or before, we talked about the beginning or the basics. Now we're talking more advanced stuff. So.
Yep.
All right. So, what are some of the more complicated deal structures you've seen as a 1031 qualified intermediary?
Okay.
Here we go. Hopping right in.
So the first one we'll probably talk about. Are we talking about reverses and improvement? Or is that another question?
No. Let's do. Yeah. So.
Or you want just complicated?
Let's just list the ones that you've done.
Okay.
The more advanced ones and reverses, improvements.
Well, there's also the multiple property exchanges.
So let's just list off the top 5 and then we'll talk about them.
The multiple property exchanges, and we're just going to start from the bottom. The simple one is you're selling one, you're buying one.
Okay.
But sometimes you're selling one, you're buying multiple buy sides. That's not a real challenge. Your time frames are still one property is sold, you got 45 days to identify whatever it is you're going to buy, 180 days to close them.
Yep.
Okay. The complicated part comes when you have more than one property you're selling.
Okay.
And you're buying one property. Now you have time frames that are in a moving target, and there's real estate skills involved in trying to negotiate having these things close within a good time frame for each other, so that you don't have a 45-day window opening up with property one that closes and these other properties aren't closing in time enough for you to identify the one. And then you've got the one property that's waiting for you. How long are they going to wait? So usually there's a lot of real estate skill involved. That's why we work closely with the real estate agent as well, in helping them to kind of counsel through that and exactly what has to be done.
Yeah, until recently, houses would fly off the market, but now the market's slowing.
It'll slow down.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a challenge, isn't it?
I believe it is.
Yeah, just
it
because
truly is. Yeah,
a lot more inventory, so you still need a buyer to come buy yours to get out.
I had one client just talk to me, and 4 properties, selling 4, he wants to buy 1. And they're in 2 different states. One is in California, and 3 of them are in Texas. And California, he said, is going to move quick. It's a multifamily. The Texas properties, he said, not so much. Okay, so, then we have to kind of talk strategies and what kinds of things can happen there.
So make sure that you're aware of that. So, all right, so then we're talking about what a reverse, and then you said improvements. What are those?
Right. So reverse exchange.
I love this one.
And this is the kind of market that reverses are getting really popular, because people see something they want to buy and their property that they want to sell is either not in escrow or it's on the market, it's not moving, and yet they don't want to miss out on this property that they found that they want.
Right.
And so there is something called a reverse exchange, and it was blessed. It's innards, its pathway was blessed by the federal government in the year 2000.
Okay.
And but before then, we had to kind of fly by the seat of our pants and kind of assume that this is what they wanted. But now we know exactly what they want in a reverse exchange. And what happens is the person that wants to do the exchange, they can purchase the replacement property first. The intermediary must be involved in that. Okay, you can't just go purchase it and then announce you're doing a reverse exchange, because the paper trail has to look, walk, and quack. Okay, so you buy what you want and then you sell what you're going to sell. The beauty of that is once you close escrow on what you want to buy, you have a 45-day window to identify what you're going to sell. Most people know exactly what they're going to sell, so that's not a problem. And then you have a whole 180-day window to sell it. So it's a beautiful thing. It's a way to make a 1031 work in reverse. There's some parameters. I mean, how do you buy that property when you don't have the equity from the one that you're trying to sell? And that's kind of how I help counsel people and explain there's a couple different ways to do that. If you have to get a loan involved, it's a little more difficult to make your exchange balance because
Okay.
remember, equal or greater value, equal or greater equity.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
got to come up with the equity up front
Okay.
for that down payment, or maybe pay cash altogether, or that reverse does not work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So be careful of that one. Can you explain how a build to suit or construction 1031 exchange?
Yes,
operates?
yes.
Do you do money lease?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm
We've got-
excited to hear about it.
yeah,
I don't know
these-
what this one is, honestly.
Yeah, these are wonderful because these work really well when the market is really, really low on inventory, and you can't find something that doesn't need a bunch of repair, or maybe it's not exactly what you want, and you've got to make some adjustments to it. A construction or improvement exchange, you can sell what you're selling, and then the equity sits with us. With the property that you're buying, we close escrow for that. We go on title on your behalf, and then the monies that you have sitting in your proceeds, we pay whoever's doing the improvements at your bequest. Okay, it's kind of like a voucher control system, but we're not the bank, and we don't jump out there and inspect anything. We simply release the money to who you tell us to pay when the work has been completed at your request. So the rules are.
Yeah, what are the rules?
The rules are, you still have to complete this in 180 days.
Oh, okay, wow.
So that can become a challenge.
With contractors.
And the challenge is the money needs to be spent in such a way that it's erected or installed in the 180 days. But you don't need a C of O.
Oh, so what's the C of O real quick?
Certificate of occupancy. It does not, you don't have to complete the project. You just have to completely spend the money on the project, and then we can transfer that title to the exchanger, and the exchange is over, and he can go on and improve it more or get a loan for the difference.
So what's the example of that?
Oh, an example. Well,
You're not coming back on.
Yeah. No, I had. They vary. They're all over the place. The last one I did was really unusual. It's not the normal thing, but he sold in California. He bought in Nevada. He bought a condo in Nevada, and in spite of the fact that the condo had been completely refurbished, he didn't like it. Okay. So he did a construction exchange, and he took, I don't remember, I think it was about $170,000, and completely refurbished it again the way he wanted to do it. Okay. In the 180-day period. Okay. With his exchange proceeds. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because the escrow officer that closed the transaction, she called me up and said, "This has to be a mistake." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "This can't be an improvement exchange." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because this condo's been completely refurbished." I said, well, okay, I understand your concern, but the exchanger has indicated he is going to completely remodel the inside to his liking, and so it is a construction exchange. And so this is kind of too a kind of a lesson in how we work with escrow and title. And that was a very experienced escrow officer. So, that was good on her part to call up and go, "Hey, this, no way," because she knew that the property had been refurbished. Okay. But it just turned out that he did not like it, and he wanted to spend the money to change it to something he liked, even though it was going to be a rental. Okay. For at least a couple years. Yeah.
Okay. So that is build or construction. Now
Right.
We're going to talk about, this is one of my favorite ones. What is a Delaware Statutory Trust? It's called a DSTs in a 1031 exchange. So what is that?
Well, the S on the end just because it's plural.
Plural, right.
So we've got a Delaware Statutory Trust, and what those are is they are fractional interests in real estate. Okay. And those trusts own real estate, and you buy into the trust. And those have been okayed for 1031 by the feds for a while. And what it is, in essence, is a very interesting little animal, because before this happened, we only had a couple things we could do that weren't real estate. this is still real estate, but your interest in it is in the trust and not in the real estate. So it's very interesting. You have an interest in the trust, and usually the trust has a management leg or outfit, okay, that manages the properties, and usually it's a big institutional, property or more than one. There's maybe more than one in the trust.
Right.
And so you're buying into the trust, you have no management responsibility.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
we're like, look at that.
You're
We're
just
like,
collecting your
as an
check,
investor.
every month or every quarter. They're all different. And they are a great vehicle to change the nature of what you have. And, a lot of people come to me and they're tired of being a landlord.
Yeah.
And they want something different. And
Great.
so, we can explain how that works, and then you've got your work cut out for you to research these companies, because they're all different. The properties are all different. They have a couple things in common. Usually there's a period of time, like you're going to buy into the trust, and then they might have a 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 year life, at the end of which they're going to sell.
So you be careful.
So you want to pay attention, and you also want to know that you've got your hands are tied a little bit. You might not be able to refinance, pull money out. You might not be able to sell when you want to sell. So you lose a little bit of your liquidity. You lose a little bit of control in exchange for, they call them
management free.
They call them the lazy man's 1031. I heard that recently, and I thought, okay, well, it's true. You're just collecting your money, but you do lose some of your options. For those of you that really like the hands-on approach.
So how does it work though? I sell a property, and then within 45 days, I gotta find a trust.
Identify DSTs that you're going to go into.
Now, a DST might be. Are they already own it, and you're buying a share of it, or
you're buying a share of the trust?
Okay, a trust.
You're entering into, and you're getting in exchange for your money, you're getting a share of the trust.
Okay.
Yeah, and the trust, like I said, it might own 1 or 2 or more properties, or a group of properties. There could be 30, 40, 50, 60, 160 other owners.
Right.
And you own a big giant building, and they're big institutional grade properties, most of them, that most individual investors would not be able to buy.
So, but how does it work though? All right, sell. I identify one of these
DSTs within the 45-day period.
And then I buy into it.
And it may not be just one.
Right.
Like,
because you got to use all your.
Yeah.
But you buy into it, and that's done. It closes escrow, and then you become a partner.
They close escrow just like everything else, and you become a member of the trust.
Now, does the trust already have the property out there?
Yep.
It's not being built or anything. It's already out there. You're just buying in.
Yeah, they can be some that are in process.
Right.
I mean, this is why you want to do all of your research. You want to make sure that the DST company is giving you all the information that makes you feel comfortable. The last inquiry I had on this, the man said he wanted something here in Nevada. In particular, he wanted something here in Reno. He didn't want to buy something in another state. That might be a tall order. There are a few that kind of are around, but you have to do your research up front.
Because you got taxes if you buy in another state.
And in some cases, the last one of these I did, we had well, this is something I probably should bring up. Sometimes, even though the company has said we're going to have this for a 3-year, 5-year, whatever your window, they also have the option to change their mind. And we had that happen one year. I was, I don't know, it was about, I can't remember how many years ago. But literally, this company decided to liquidate a property, and there were over 300 owners.
So can they do a 1031?
They can all do a 1031.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
stressful.
and so some of them wanted to, others didn't. We ended up, I can't remember with our company, we ended up with a huge number of those, and yeah, we did, large companies, so we just divvied them up and we did them. I had 14 of them because one of my customers was engaged, and so he came and said I need to do a 1031 out of my DST. He had 14 whatever, and It's a
Wow.
lot of work, yeah, but, so you do lose some control.
Right.
But they are hands-off, they're lazy man, and some people just love them, you know.
And it
Some people
depends
just
on
love
what
'em, yeah.
the DST, how they have it set up, how you get paid. Like, it may not be monthly,
Exactly.
maybe quarterly, annually.
Exactly, they're all different, you've gotta just kinda do your due diligence.
So one
and
question-
look at them.
How, besides Google, can you provide like a website? Is there like a LoopNet or some kind of site that you say it gives you a list of them, or no, it's not that lucky?
You know, I know some names of ones that we've done DSTs with before, but to be honest, because that market is constantly changing,
Yeah.
I would Google and say
Okay.
DST 1031.
Okay.
And you could even say, you know, California or Nevada or Las Vegas, or, you know, whatever you want to try to focus on,
Okay.
and then start piecing through it. I will say this.
Yep.
Last time I was in Las Vegas, I met a gentleman who specialized in due diligence on DSTs.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was that little faction of people, you could actually Google that as well.
You pay them and they'll find
They
you.
pay and they
It's like
do
a
their
realtor,
due,
or
yeah.
it's almost like a.
Yeah, and I think he
Manager.
told me he was charging between $5,000 and $7,000 to do your due diligence for you and give you a report.
Like a portfolio,
Yes,
like these
to
ones.
explain all of the details.
Yeah, because I'm
So-
sure there are some that are complicated. With all
Oh
the
yeah,
details.
yeah. So I thought he was very entrepreneurial spirit,
Yep.
thinking of, here's a need, I'm gonna, you know, supply this. Here's a need, I'm gonna satisfy this need, and yeah, he was a very smart man.
So-
yeah.
We're not going to talk about the 7 deadly sins. We talked about this.
Yeah.
Is there like 1 or 2 that you need to know about?
Well, we're
Her time is valuable, so.
Yeah, we're leaping into a slightly different. So the DST is one thing. The 7 deadly sins have to do with the what we call a 721 exchange.
Okay.
The 721 exchange, and this is another option. You know, you can go from your real estate into what they call operating partnership interests. Okay.
Who comes up with all this stuff?
OPs, yeah.
This is great.
Well, it's like this. It's like, you know, the whole financial world. Way back when I got into this industry, none of this was allowed.
Right.
You know, it was all, you know, you had to do this way or no way or the highway. You know, now we've got all these other options. So the 721s, the issue there is you're going to sell your real estate and you buy into a partnership. And it's an UPREIT. It's a real estate investment trust again.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
not a DST.
It's a REIT.
It's an UPREIT.
Yep.
Okay, and what happens is, at that point, your real estate investment has now been converted to non-real, and it's a security.
Oh.
And so you not only lose your liquidity, or lose sometimes the ability to pull. In fact, you can't change the debt. That's one of the sins. So once you do that, you now have a security, and you cannot exchange again
Oh.
into real estate. You can't do
So
a
it's the end.
1031.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the end of your exchange career, but you're in there without a taxable event until you sell that.
Okay. So
yeah.
make sure you do your homework. Talk to your accountant. Talk to Kansas, because it's complicated. What about REITs? Talk about, they're called real estate
Investment trusts.
REITs. And what is that? And how would you get into that? I mean, I see that in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
You see some
Right.
commercial.
Again,
REITs
your Delaware Statutory Trusts are a type of investment trust.
Okay.
Your 721s are an UPREIT, but they're partnership interest.
Okay.
And most of the other critters that look, walk, and quack like a real estate investment trust are not going to qualify for 1031.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do your homework on that. We'll get back to that. So, we talked about a lot of these. Like last time, she kind of answered all of them, and it takes all the fun out of it.
Because he's got these great questions.
We kind of talked about this, right? How do partnership interest and fractional ownerships complicate a 1031 process?
Actually, we did not. Yeah,
Okay.
but that is a good question.
So how do they,
Yeah.
these fractional complicate
Yeah.
the 1031 exchange?
Your partnership, okay, so let's go back to the basics. I have a property I want to sell.
Yep.
It's owned in a partnership. And, you know, we encounter those a lot in commercial, but every now and then we encounter them also in residential.
When you say partnership, like an LLC?
Partnership is an actual partnership, and you're filing a Schedule K, or it's an LLC,
Okay.
and you're filing a Schedule K. Because
That's common. People own a property together.
LLC of like if you're not a single member LLC or a husband and wife LLC,
Okay.
then your
You're a
LLC
partnership.
is a partnership.
Okay, so this is perfect.
Yeah, so the partnership is an entity in itself.
Right.
And what happens is the complications, that was the question. Okay, I'm in a partnership, the partnership is the owner, and we want to sell this property, but one partner wants to take his money, the other partner wants to do a 1031. Then that complicates the picture.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the complication. The government doesn't like, they want the
Whole or nothing.
they want the seller to do the 1031. If you drop the partnership at the sale and then one goes this way and the other one goes that way, the government wants to take their money.
Take both or just the person leaving?
They're going to take all of the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So make sure your partners are on board early on. Because some partnerships start 20 years and then
exactly
life events happen, right?
And then they come to the end and they
go,
well, we want out now. And, there are ways to skin that cat, but most of the time you got to do it a couple years before you're on the closing table.
Okay.
And that's stuff I can help with too.
So this is why you get her involved early.
You sound like a broken record.
I know, but it's just like you need all your advisors in on this.
Yes, all your team.
You gotta get your team, build it.
Yep.
So, what are some common mistakes or misconceptions investors have when attempting more complex 1031 exchange transactions?
We talked about those at the beginning, but I will add that most of the time what happens is I think they simplify in their mind, oh, it's equal or greater value, and they don't realize that they can't replace money with a loan. So they'll take a simple...
Give me an example. Let's just say 500,000, 250.
Okay, so I'm going to... I'm selling at 500.
Okay.
I owe 300,000. Okay. I'm going to buy it 2. I'm going to get a loan for 2, and I'm going to keep the 100,000.
Okay, can't do that.
But I'm buying equal value.
Right.
Why can't I do that? Because you took 100,000 out of the exchange.
But you can do that after you close. Like that's when you refinance, right, and take that money out.
You could do it after you close.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You just can't do it when you're.
So there's just a misconception. Sometimes the easy rule gets applied to something that's not easy. And this is where I've learned over the last 28 years is explain what you're trying to do, so that I can help. Whether it can be structured in such a way that you can accomplish what you're trying to do, or if it can't.
Right.
And then I can make the rules work for you.
Okay.
The last time I think the one I'm thinking of is the guy, he wanted to do the 4 properties.
Yep.
He wants also to do a reverse.
Oh.
So that was a 45-minute conversation, at the end of which he had a firm understanding, and I have to walk through it in my mind too. Is it how can we do
structure this to make
how do we make the rules work in his favor? And I think another deal like that, multiple sale sides, one buy side, reverse exchange, was fixed because the seller of the buy side was willing to do a seller carryback. And that solved the whole problem with making it look walk and quack. So there's all kinds of ways
to make these things work.
Yeah, and then there's some that just they're not going to fly, or you
Right.
could throw them up in there and pretend it's going to fly.
So I think you answered this, but we're going to go 3 more questions and then we're
Okay.
out. How should investors approach due diligence when considering a more advanced 1031?
Well, I think we did answer that. Is get someone that does the due diligence. If you're not comfortable doing your own, hire somebody to do it.
Yeah, especially on the more advanced ones.
Absolutely. The DSTs and the 721s and the ones where there's still real estate, but you're not getting an interest in real estate. You want to have real due diligence done, and you might hire somebody to help you do that.
Great.
Yeah.
And do you have names for that, or we just Google it?
I would just Google it, because
Or
the people that I've worked with over the years, some of them are retired.
I know. What's up with that? We're all going to retire something. All right. So finally, closing practical questions. So 2 of those.
Okay.
What advice would you give to investors considering their first 1031 exchange, especially if they're interested in DSTs or other advanced structures?
Yeah.
We just gotta talk about
Yeah.
DSTs.
Well,
Get someone else involved.
I've always tell people, if you think you might want to do a 1031, get a hold of the intermediary first.
Okay.
Because
Whoever it is.
yeah, because whatever you're trying to accomplish, you want to know how the pieces are going to fit together, and the intermediary is the best person that's going to be able to explain that to you.
Yep. Yeah. That's the best advice. Last question, and then we're out. Are there any resources or professionals you recommend for those looking to invest in 1031 exchange strategies besides a QI?
Well, like the Ken Angst
Yeah,
team?
I mean, of course. The Angst Real Estate team.
Well, you know what?
If you're doing
Here's the
residential.
deal. I always say, if your real estate agent is an investor, you're way ahead of the game.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
So if
good.
you're an investor and your real estate agent's an investor, you're way ahead of the game.
That's good
And
advice.
and I mean, I'm not trying to butter Ken up, but he does have that experience, and he's well qualified to be dealing with investors. So that's the excellent thing.
So, yes, and then CPA, build your team. We've already
Your
talked about
CPA,
that.
yeah, you want your CPA needs to be familiar, or needs to be
Willing to
talk to
or look into it.
Work with the team,
Yeah. And attorneys.
And most of the time, I don't have a problem with it. Most CPAs are just totally, we're on the same page, or maybe I have to ask them some questions and they can, research the answers, or maybe their customer has to ask, and we work together. And
the other thing too is what I've recognized over the years, being a real estate investor, working in partnerships, but particularly having a spouse, making sure that they're on board with all of this too. Because I just find it, if my spouse is a little bit more hands off, but generally speaking, she gets involved when we start looking at all these different. So you gotta have your spouse involved.
I have a horror story I can share.
Yeah, one
Are
horror
you
story
sure?
ain't enough. Let's go.
One horror story.
Oh no! If someone gets divorced, they don't know.
We were
Oh, my
doing a
gosh.
1031 exchange for an older couple.
I'm not talking about spouses.
They owned a building, a commercial
geez.
building, and they worked that building together, worked the business together. He decided he wanted to do a 1031 exchange on the property, and so entered into escrow. We did the exchange documentation. It closed escrow.
Oh my gosh.
The monies came to the intermediary, and the wife filed for divorce and demanded her
no.
half of the proceeds.
All right, so make sure your spouse is on board.
Make sure your spouse is on board.
Yeah, before you do that, because that probably negates it all, right?
Oh, it was a mess. We worked through it, but it was a mess.
So make sure your spouse, if you're doing these, is involved too.
Yeah.
So Candace, awesome job. Give Candace a call. We got her number here. Make sure you call this number because we want to make sure you
775
reach her.
710-9119.
That's her direct number. She's the most qualified, knowledgeable person probably in the West Coast, right?
I don't know.
But you-
Probably not West Coast,
To
but
be clear, though, you do more than just Reno, Northern Nevada. You do.
the whole country.
Okay, yeah, she
Yeah,
lives in Reno and does
Yeah.
these, but she's qualified to do all these.
Yeah,
around.
the intermediary work is nationwide that our company does. So it doesn't matter what state you're in, or where you're selling, or where you're buying.
Last question is: are you busy right now? Are people doing 1031s?
Absolutely. It is definitely busy right now.
So people are doing
Yep.
it. So if you're looking at that opportunity to get out of your single property, or you have multiple ones, let's look into it. Give us a call and we'll analyze your
Thank you,
situation.
Ken.
So thank you. All right, you guys, stay tuned. Like our channel. We have a lot of great guests. We're having someone else on next week that you're going to want to check out. So give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and let's shoot some questions in the comments. When you see one of these videos, you have questions. If you send something in the comments and we can't answer it, we'll send it over to her and get in touch with you. So, awesome. All right, guys, take care. Thanks, and have a good weekend.